Hi, I'm Rachel Lancaster, and this is the Magnificent Midlife Podcast. This is where we celebrate women in midlife and beyond. We challenge the status quo and bash those negative stereotypes about being an older woman. We're not over the hill at 40, 50, 60. We're just getting started. And the world needs us now more than ever. I'll be talking all things midlife, about issues that matter, and sharing fabulous stories of amazing women doing very cool stuff. Now's our time. My guest today is Breeda Bermingham, and she is a social entrepreneur. She's founder of the Midlife Women Rock Project and has just published a wonderful book, Midlife Women Rock, a Menopause Story for a New Generation. She's a former midwife and nurse, so she knows a lot about women's health. She also went back to full-time education at 49 and completed a psychology degree and a master's in sociology. Wow! This is a tour de force. Welcome, Breeda.
Hello, Rachel. Lovely to be here.
It's so good to finally meet you and connect because I feel you are my kindred spirit in Ireland. We have a very similar agenda and passion and wishes for menopause. So I'd like to start by asking why you felt a need to write this book.
Wow, why I felt a need to write it. Well, I'm going to go back a few years, Rachel, back to when I was studying psychology. And honestly, I never envisaged I'd end up in this the menopause space that I'm in at the moment. So it was in 2018 that I came upon Midlife Women. I decided to review the research around midlife women for my final year project in psychology, and there's a massive dearth in the research. But in particular, I was fascinated with the literature around menopause. And having worked with women all my life, as I was perusing the studies and the research, something just didn't resonate with me. It was overwhelmingly negative, and I just wondered, something's not right here. You know, for years I've worked with women across the demographic divide in the public sector and private sector, and hospital and community-based nursing, and my overarching belief in working with women is that, challenges come up all of the time, I think, in all of our lives. With the right information, and knowledge and education, we overcome. So what was so different about this menopause? So that's what started my journey. And I went from there then to dig further. I became like a detective investigating what the heck has gone on here. And I did a sociology master's. I opted to go into sociology because I was interested in the cultural and the societal story around menopause. And while I was doing my master's, I was researching menopause, and I did 20 in-depth interviews with women here in Ireland on their understandings and experiences of menopause. Along with I'd set up the Midlife Women Rock Cafe, so I was meeting women monthly and listening to their stories. And I'm really interested in women's lived experience. So the stories were extremely powerful. And I just felt, having listened to the stories last year, I knew in my heart that I had to write this book and let women's voices come to the fore. And it's the women's voices in here in my book that I believe is the most powerful part of the book. So, and it's the transformation once information and education is provided. And also, I think the power of community, how women can help each other during this stage of life. And I look at when my own children were young, and as I worked as a midwife, breastfeeding support groups were powerful. Mother and toddler groups were powerful. And here in menopause, I feel women would benefit massively from having the support of other women in a safe space. I'd say the cafes, the Midlife Women Rock Cafes, are somewhat similar to Rachel Weese's menopause cafes. I guess the big difference is that I provide information. I do presentations over Zoom. We're on Zoom at the moment due to COVID. And I also invite in guest speakers. So that's just the difference between Rachel and myself. But the ethos is the same. It's about trying to get women to support and help one another through this transition. And it is just a transition. That's what I'm a firm believer in. So that's why I wrote the book. And it was a 9-month gestation. It's like my fifth child. I have 4 children. And it was only recently I discovered that this is 9 months. I started in February, and I honestly would not have completed it, Rachel, had we not been in lockdown. We were in a very stringent lockdown here, January, February, March into April. And that's what helped me to sit down, focus, and start writing my story. And I'm very proud of it, I must say. So it's my COVID legacy. That's the way I look at it.
You should be very proud of it. It's a fantastic book. I recommend everybody go and buy it and read it, because there's so much in it, and it is such a refreshing take on menopause. Because you and I, we both get a bit frustrated, don't we, with the sort of doom and gloom that it's something terrible to be endured, whereas actually there are so many positives about menopause. Obviously, it can be difficult, and there are things that we need to sort out and deal with and cope with, but it is also something really positive, isn't it?
Yes, and I have discovered, Rachel, again over the last few years, and the story is still evolving. I feel we do not have all the puzzle pieces, because I've now come to realize menopause is this massive puzzle, and there are lots of different pieces in the puzzle. And we've landed in the negative story because we've had no preparation, no education, no widely available, accessible information out there, and support. And this has happened because women have been silent. We've remained silent. And Mary Beard talks about mute women, silence, shame, and menopause, being bedfellows. And I love the work of Brené Brown. And I use the work of Brené Brown from my psychology days in looking at what has happened to us as menopausal women. And it's societal and cultural. This is such a big, the story is around the silencing of us at this stage in life. And it's intergenerational, and it will continue unless we decide, our generation of women decide, this story can change. And I believe completely that it can be changed from the crisis, loss, degeneration. Like, we look at statistics. I love data. I love looking at the science. I love looking at statistics. And we look at 80% of women will have some form of symptoms as they're moving through the menopausal transition. 20% apparently report that they feel nothing, that they just get on with it, and that's great. And then there's that 20 to 25% of women that need the extra help. And I firmly believe that, for that 20 to 25% to really be helped, the remainder of us need to speak up and start talking about menopause. Because, Rachel, I look at menopause like as the reversal of puberty. If we look at life stages and transitions in women's lives, we look at puberty, and if we see what's happening to our teenagers, anyone that has teenagers or knows teenagers, they're moody, they have skin changes, they need a lot of space. They go to their room, they bang the doors, they're angry, they're irritable. That's us, as we're moving through the menopause. We have these symptoms, they're all very normal. And what I've discovered, again, is this validation piece around women realizing, it is normal to be irritable and to be feeling angry. I do a lot on anger, because I felt an awful lot of it myself as I was moving through perimenopause. But it's the realization, it's that silence has not helped us women realize what menopause truly is. So I look at puberty, I look at pregnancy, and a certain percentage of women are going to find pregnancy difficult. But the overarching story around pregnancy is not negative. Puberty, a certain percentage of teenagers are going to find the puberty transition difficult. But the overarching story around puberty is not negative. And this is where we need to shift to with menopause. A certain percentage of women are going to find menopause difficult. But the overarching story of menopause should no longer be negative. And that's where I'm moving to with it, because I look at transitions in women's lives, and that's the shift, that menopause is something to in many ways be embraced. But we can't embrace it if we haven't got the knowledge. And it's that knowledge deficit and education deficit that's caused most of the issues.
Breeda's now making me cry. If you can see me on camera, I've literally got tears in my eyes. It's not just goosebumps this time, I've got tears in my eyes. I love that analogy. I love the way you've just described it. I've never thought of that before. That is just wonderful. I remember Darcy Steinke, I think it was, talking about how we struggle with things as women, but the overall result is good. Like, so we have an awful time in childbirth, but then we have a baby, and things like that. And I see menopause a bit like that as well, that, we may struggle a bit through it, but at the end, it's really good. But I love the way you've described that, and I'm literally wiping away tears.
Oh, Rachel, I didn't want you to be in tears, but I've thought about this.
Happy tears, good tears, happy tears.
I've given it a lot of thought, and I've thought about puberty, pregnancy, menopause. These are huge life transitions, and menopause is highly significant. It's been pushed to one side for too long. It's a highly significant transition in our lives, and women need to realise this. But the overarching story around menopause does not need to be negative. For a percentage, it is. They deserve to be supported completely. But for the rest of us, and hang on a second, I'll put my hand up. I've loads of symptoms, but I becoming a detective, I found the support. But other women are not in the position that I was in, that I was able to go back in and go to books, research papers, that's how I got my information. But it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy to access the information. And there's something wrong there. We deserve as women to have that information. And it's by breaking down that silence, that's how we're going to get the information, Rachel.
So why have we been silent? Why has it transpired that, we talk about pregnancy, we talk about childbirth, we talk about puberty, but menopause has been the big taboo?
Yeah, it's been a massive taboo, and the taboo is the problem. That's what I've come to discover. It's the taboo has kept us silent, and this taboo is coming from the past. It's systems and structures that have been in place, that have been handed down through the generations, and the taboo is going to continue unless we decide to break it. And taboos are broken down by open conversation and open discourse, and bringing a topic out of the closet, because menopause has been inside in that closet for a long, long time, because we have been shamed. It's all about the shaming of women who reach their post-reproductive years. And that is the real story, I believe.
So why the shame? I mean, I know what I think, but what do you think?
We're shamed because, for some reason, society believes that women's value is less once our reproductive years are over. And I love Gail Sheedy's book on silent passage, and there's a great a page that she wrote about when she went on the Oprah Winfrey show. This is in the 1990s, and the producer telling her, Dr. Sheedy, it was easier for us to get to find an audience of women to come in and be in the show who had killed their spouses than it was to find women to talk about menopause. This was the 1990s in America.
Good grief.
And Rachel, then I went investigating further. I was thinking, what the heck is going on in America? American women, they know so much. And then I discovered the work of Dr. Robert Wilson.
Oh, I love him.
Back in the 1960s. And he was some piece of work when it comes to women. And I guess he started out thinking he was going to help women. But what I was interested was the language he was using, that language of crippled, withered, castrates, you've lost your femininity, you're losing your sexuality, you're becoming a withered prune, your partner is going to leave you. This was the narrative that was peddled back in the 60s.
So he wrote a book, didn't he?
He did. Feminine. Yeah, Feminine Forever was the book. And that book did a massive injustice to women. And that story that was peddled, and he was the darling of the airwaves across America at the time, in the 60s and 70s. And that shut down women's voices. And the media latched onto that story. And as a result, Oprah couldn't get an audience, imagine, in the 90s, of women to come and speak about menopause, because it was gone into the psyche at that stage by the time the 1990s came, that, oh God, when you get to menopause, there's something, your value is gone, you've lost your sexuality, you've lost your femininity, you're dried up, and you're this word, a crippled castrate, which makes my blood boil. And I guess if I hadn't come into menopause land myself and started investigating, I probably would have believed it, that this is what happens to us, and we're shunted then to one side just when so many women are coming into their prime. And this is the sadness of the story, Rachel, to date. Now, we can't change the past, but we have an opportunity to change the future. So many women coming into their prime, and they're leaving work, and they're feeling that, my best years are behind me. And if there's anyone listening to this podcast, that is a complete and utter myth. It's a myth that we've been fed, and it has to change. And the only way we're going to change it is by providing the facts and the proof that it is not true. And we have to also remember that the menopause space and women's voices, in the past, there were very few women's voices. It was male doctors, let's say male professors, that were writing for other doctors. But women's voices or women's perspectives have not really been included in the literature. And that's not just in menopause. So if we look at other areas of life, what's happening at the moment is more and more the realization has come about that women have been left out of history. I mean, I love Caroline Credo's book there on Invisible Women. There's another one, The Authority Gap, recently written, The Invisible Job. A lovely Irish writer just wrote that book recently about the domestic load and what we carry as women. And then we have Unwell Women, which just came out this year.
I just was thinking of that book, and it's on my Kindle, and I haven't read it yet. I started it, but I know that the whole medical history has just been dominated by men. And actually, it's interesting because they've done the same with COVID, with the vaccine, haven't they? That they haven't considered the hormonal impact on women, and they've sort of dismissed that in women's periods, there's been a lot of women who've had problems. I'm not suggesting that it's a long-term issue. I don't believe it is. But that there has been some impact on menstruation, and that doctors didn't really consider that because it wasn't life-threatening.
Really? Oh, right. Okay. I haven't read that, and I must look it up actually. Yeah.
I think, just to say, it all settles down after a while, just if anyone's getting worried. It's just, I think, a 1 month thing, but there has been evidence of that.
Okay. And when we look at, let's say, menstruation and menstruality, and it's wonderful to see so much more, in the public domain again about menstruality, because it's that same shame. It's the shaming of the woman's body, and that's, it moves along as we get older. I've discovered, and I'm going to look further into the shaming. Why are we shamed? And we will continue to be shamed unless we put our hand up and say, stop shaming us. That there's actually an awful lot to us when we get to midlife, and we have so much to offer in society. And it's a structural, it's a cultural and structural story. And I don't know if there's anyone to blame, and I don't like using the word blame anyway, but we just need, I think, as a collective of women, to change the story for ourselves and for those that are coming behind us. I think it's so important. And the more and more voices coming into the space, I think, Rachel, that, you know, and you with your podcast is wonderful. And this is how we bring about societal change. It's one voice at a time, and that's how it happens. And it's slow, you know. It's not going to happen overnight, but there's a huge momentum for change, I believe, out there amongst midlife women at the moment.
One of the things I am interested in and have written about is that the experience of women in other cultures is so different, whether that be faraway cultures or even quite nearby cultures. So I don't know whether this works for Ireland, but I've discovered that in Protestant countries, there is more ageism. And because ageism is so closely linked to sexism, there is more ageism against women. So I see women really suffering the most in America, the UK, Australia, South Africa, and that those places, sort of based on Anglo-Saxon culture, suffer the most. And that is where women have the least status as they get older. Whereas in Catholic countries, women they still have more status as they get older. So in France, in Greece, in Spain, women don't suffer the same kind of discrimination as they get older as they do here in the UK, for example. And I find this fascinating, and I think I've done some research that it goes back a little bit to the Protestant work ethic in terms of the ageism, but then I believe that the sexism is because we, as you've talked about, we tie a woman's value so closely to her ability to procreate.
Yes, yes. And listening to you there, Rich, that's all really fascinating. I feel as women, we, you know, the bar that we set for ourselves as we age, I think that needs to change. We need to change this culture of like, as we get older, it's still, you know, the physical body, it's the physical person. And that's where culture and media comes in. It's challenging, you know, the older body. And I love Angela's campaign there, Behind the Woman, you know, changing the face
Yes.
of menopause. She has a magnificent
Yes.
campaign, changing that face. And I loved Kate Winslet recently when she did Mayor of Easton, and she asked, stop airbrushing me, stop filtering me, you know, allow me be and allow me become. And that's where I feel us midlife women, we need to kind of, you know, own who we are, own our wrinkles, own our scars. We've got this massive life experience, and I wouldn't go back to my 20s for anything. Because we're coming, and this is part of the menopause journey, it's coming into who we truly and really are. And it's the courage that comes with us moving consciously through that transition. And yes, when we're in perimenopause, and I was one of these women, our confidence drops, you know, completely. But getting the right supports, you can come back out and across the bridge. I talk to the women I work with about this bridge that's shaky and turbulent, but with the right supports, you get over it. And you know, another key part of this puzzle is doing this inner work, Rachel, you know, investing in ourselves. Boundaries are huge for women, you know, by the time we get to 50, because our generation of women, when we were younger, we were not taught about boundaries or saying no or putting ourselves first, whereas the generations behind us, women, will be different. I think the self-confidence there and that self-esteem level will be different, but our generation, we haven't been taught that. So boundary work, or the joy of being selfish there, somebody wrote that book, I thought was brilliant, and she's super on social media, explaining the difference between boundaries and being selfish. And I think all women would benefit massively from understanding boundaries when we're in our menopausal years.
Doing that inner work is so important. And I think, menopause, describe it as this gift, because we have this time to reevaluate everything, don't we? It's interesting what you talk about, boundaries and generations. My mother at 87, she still feels guilty about sitting down and reading a book on a Saturday morning. I said to her the other day, I said, what are you doing, Mum? Just read your book whenever you like. But she feels she should be cleaning or ironing or something. Even though she lives alone, it's only for her. But just that sitting down and taking time for herself is still a luxury at 87. I'm like, no.
And that self-care piece is so important when we are in the depths of symptoms. It's so important, and that guilt piece that a lot of women have, or I think it's also this realization that, you know, my 20s, 30s, early 40s, I was superwoman. I could do everything, and suddenly I'm asking myself, what's after happening to me? And sadly, an awful lot of women blame themselves. They turn it in and they're blaming themselves that, oh God, I'm not as productive now. And what they need to realize is that this is it's a call for you to prioritize yourself for a while, whether it's 6 months, a year, 2 years, and really, really look after yourselves. And as you and I know, Rachel, the benefits are massive when you do that awareness piece and that kind of a reset piece. They are huge. Talking about your mum, my own mum turns 85 actually next month. And like that, when I was researching and I was asking her and talking to her about menopause, in her day, there was very little said about it. She said nobody talked. You just got on with it. You know, you were considered weak if you put your hand up and said, you know, I need help. And I was looking at my mum in her 70s and in her early 80s, and I was thinking, she still has so much value and she's so much to give in society. And Mum was saying to me, let's say, my dad was a farmer and Mum was a stay-at-home mother. And so when we all left, there were 6 of us. She would have been a magnificent parenting instructor or a parent craft teacher. But she said, you know, in your 60s, nobody went back out to work. It just wasn't the done thing. But there's a generation there of women whose value we've kind of lost. We've lost the magnificent set of skills that they have or that they can impart. But I'm hoping as we move forward that, you know, our value in society will be recognized more, because we do have so much to provide younger generations with, and it is so important. So it's a story, I feel, Rachel, we're just starting. We're starting.
It's exciting, isn't
Yes,
it?
it is.
Yeah. We like changing the world, don't we, Breeda?
But you need a team. You need, you know, as I
Yeah.
said at the end of my book, you know, I was reading Melinda Gates, and she also refers to this: women in isolation, they can't do anything. And what's happened in menopause is the silence has kept us isolated, but the silence is being broken. So, you know, watch out. You know, women are rising and they're coming into the space, and let's see what's going to happen as a result. So it is very exciting, yes.
Before we hit record, you were telling me about a conference that you'd come to in London, and the fact that you turned up alone and that everybody there was alone. Tell me about that.
Yes, that was Meg Matthews' conference back in 2019, Rachel. And I think when the history books will be written, that's going to go down as quite a marker event that Meg courageously organised, because on that day there were 300 of us in the room, and Meg mentioned that over 70% of us had come on our own to that conference, which Dr. Louise Newson was the medical lead actually on the day there, and she was saying that she'd been to many medical conferences, but this conference that Meg had organised was somewhat very different. It was looking at a woman holistically. It took a holistic approach to a woman who was moving through her menopausal years, and medicalization is one part of that puzzle. It's just one part of it. There's so many other parts to us: our mindsets, our belief systems, our our lifestyle, food changes. You know, there's so much we can do as we're moving through the menopause to help ourselves. So I talk about this toolkit and having that toolkit. But when I attended the conference and I look back now, I mean, wow, so much has happened in the UK around the menopause space since Meg Matthews organised that conference. And it's more and more, I think, of those types of conferences that we need. I remember Petra Coveney, the menopause yoga instructor, was also there on that day, and it's the collaboration of the voices that was very powerful on that day. And we also had touched on the silence. We back then we didn't understand. I didn't understand about the silence or where it had come from, but doing my own work and my own research, it's the shame. We've been shamed into silence. That's why we've been shamed culturally to stay quiet and, say, get on with it. And that's fine for the percentage of women that can get on with it. But we're doing a massive disservice to those women that truly need the medical help, let's say, as we're moving through this phase. The rest of us need to speak up. And the more of us that are doing it, the better. But not only in the UK, in Ireland, when I was researching as well for the book, I discovered women over the last few years, they were traveling like 3 and 4 hours to go and hear somebody speak on menopause. This is how they were negotiating, Rachel, the silence. And they were traveling on their own. They weren't going in groups of women to say, hey, let's go together and let's find out what this is about. They were going on their own, traveling from Dublin or from to Cork, Galway to Donegal. It was amazing listening to the stories that what women do to negotiate this silence. And it's that silence piece is the real enemy to us women. But if we can break down the silence, bring menopause out, we can change the story around this time in life, which is only going to benefit us.
Then we could take it even a little bit further, can't we? And make it about celebrating. So even the women who don't notice it, they can actually recognize what it is and what it means for them in terms of the positive impact on their life.
Yes, and there are huge positives. As we emerge on the other side of that bridge, there are huge positives to tap into. But women again need the knowledge. It's about the investment in the self piece in order to access those positives, access to deep creativity, innate leadership ability. I'm very interested in that one, and that we actually have. And Dorothy Steinke, in her book, she was questioning that. And Monash University in Australia, there's a lot of emerging research there in the last few years. Again, looking at what has happened. Why is it so negative? And I loved also the work of Vanessa Beck and Joe Brewis. Their names came up when I was researching as well from the UK on the anger around why we have stayed quiet and why has it been hidden in society. There's a massive injustice to us.
And it's still negative for women to be angry. But actually, if we channel our anger positively, then that can be a huge positive force for change in the world.
Exactly right. And that is what's happening in with a lot of the women like yourself that I'm meeting. It's the anger that's driving them. Vanessa Beck, Joe Brewis, the anger at what has happened to us. And that's actually motivates me as well, that there's an injustice here. I'm going to write a book, and that's my legacy towards the menopause story. And more and more of us are needed. And I think that's the personal responsibility I think women need to take. When I look back to 2 years ago, I could have probably I could have stayed on the fence. And I've spoken about this to a lot of my friends, how we sit on the fence, women. We see things happening around us, but we say, look, somebody else will do it, or somebody else will deal with that. And women need to realize we have such abilities to actually bring about change, finding the right structures and systems to help us bring that change about, and become involved. And that's why I love the menopause space. Is there are so many other women there. We're all supporting each other here in this space, and it's all about rising women up and trying to benefit other women and bring them with us. I think that's what we all stand for. And that's why we're here. And let's keep going. That's what I say.
Well, menopause has been a catalyst for amazing change in your life, hasn't it? But I'd love to ask you, what was it like going back to full-time education at 49? How did you cope with that? And how did you adapt? And what did it feel like?
Rachel, it was, I suppose, one of the scariest things I've done in my life. I did it because, having read Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. That was and my friends laughed at me so much when I tell them the story. I read that book, I remember the end of 2014, and there were action steps in the book. And I'd often read self-help books over the years, but this was one of the first times I actually followed and I actually did the action steps. And I found the confidence to sign up for the psychology degree. And I remember at the time thinking, look, if I don't get it, it's not the end of the world. And I got a place. But then when I got the place, I had these awful jitters. Oh no, I don't think I can, it's that imposter syndrome. I don't think I could do it. And I remember the first day walking into to college, and oh my God, I was so frightened. Number one, going back into a system. Would I be able to cope? Would I be able to manage the study? I would be sitting inside in college with all these younger people. So that was another issue. But by Christmas, by the end of the first term, I had realized, hey, I can do this. And that was the support of other mature students, because in psychology, there were quite a number of others that had returned. And the lecturers here in Waterford Institute of Technology, where I was studying, they were absolutely fantastic. So once I got over the hurdles of the fear, the fear, and found that courage, and it was like semester to semester. That's how I managed it. So for any woman thinking about it, and I've met actually in the work I'm doing, I've met quite a number of women who have gone back and are doing courses, they've changed career paths, and it's that courage piece and the belief system in ourselves. So over the last 5-6 years, I believe an awful lot more in myself and my own ability, which I did not have before I went back to study.
It's fantastic. I just think it's brilliant.
Thank you.
I had to write a book about going back into full-time education at 49. It's brilliant. And then you went and did a master's after that, didn't you? Crikey.
Yeah, I did the master's, in sociology. I'm more interested, in the lived experience and societal structure rather than psychology is more individual. So I'm more in the group think and the group dynamics. That's where, and a lot of my fellow students then were going off doing their PhDs, but that's not my calling. I was catapulted this way into to menopause, and I mean some of them laugh that this is the track because they're all inside now doing their PhD. But I said no, that's not where I'm going. But Rachel, I think with the work I do with women, I often say when we're sitting down in sessions or in groups, I say, picture yourself in the rocking chair at 90. I like this analogy because somebody said it to me about 10 years ago. When and you're looking back on your life, and if you knew you were going to live until you're 90, what would you do different in your 40s or 50s? And I just love that analogy. And it's amazing when people go away, think about it, write about it. I love the journaling as we're moving through the perimenopause, menopausal years. It's your mindset. Your mindset changes. And I mean, our thoughts really do have a massive impact on our cellular metabolism. And another individual that I loved when I was studying psychology was the neuroscientist Michael Mesnerick, who has done a lot of research on the brain and the aging brain. And the 55-year-old brain can be as sharp as the 25-year-old brain. Now, when I heard that, I immediately thought, hey, I need to hear more about this. What's he talking about? Because I always believed that our brain cells were actually dying as we got older. And that's another complete myth.
Another myth?
Yeah, another myth. We actually, we can be sharper in our 50s as we were in our 20s. And it's that having that growth mindset, having that curiosity. I'm still interested, or I want to find out. And I've always been curious about things, and I could spend hours in a library. I'm naturally introverted, so
You're my twin.
But yeah, it's these myths that are out there that need to be exposed and challenged, and to make the world a better place for us as women as we age. And who benefits? Everybody benefits. Relationships, families, greater society. This is why I think that's why I keep doing what I'm doing. The whole of society is going to benefit from us, and there needs to be more women, I believe, in their 50s and 60s sitting around decision-making tables, and in particular mothers. Rachel, I look back at my own life. I mean, we juggle as mothers. We're juggling parenthood, we're juggling relationships, we're juggling jobs, we're juggling managing homes, we're CEOs, as mothers. And when our children leave, there's an opportunity there for many, many women, if they decide to use all the skills that they have garnered together and put it into something else. Because that's where I've discovered now, having come out on the post-menopausal side. I suppose I always had a lot of energy. It dipped for a number of years when I was in perimenopause, because I was landed into it. I didn't know I was perimenopausal at all. Never heard the word perimenopause before 2018. Was in absolute shock when I saw 34 plus different symptoms, psychological, emotional, and physical. And that really angered me, that I did not know this, and other women deserve to know this,
And you were working in women's health.
I know. But I have many friends, who are in the medical profession. They did not know that all these symptoms existed, So
I know in the book you talk about the importance of sleep. And I'd just like to touch on that, because I do think it's something that A, we struggle with, but B, we perhaps discount, that we don't actually realise just how important it is.
Yeah, I started actually with sleep. I was thinking, what is the factor that is most important? And the one that comes up a lot when I'm doing work in groups, women believe that, when you're coming into midlife, your sleep patterns change. And there's this belief system that, oh yeah, we're going to have to live with that for the rest of our lives. And that's a massive myth. Completely. That story has to be challenged. And we deserve to be supported around sleep. And the first thing that people do when they're not sleeping is maybe go to their GP, and they're maybe prescribed a sleeping tablet. But when you look at sleep and you look at the physiology of sleep, the psychology of sleep, the science of sleep, it's so much bigger. There's so many little things that we can do. And that's why in the book I talk about even changing your bedroom, about what you can do before you go to bed at night. But sleep for me is the number one. If you can sleep, and that's where the hot flushes and the flashes keep people, it disrupts people's sleep, women's sleep. And a lot of women then find it very hard if they're suffering with night sweats for a year or two. Their pattern has been broken, and they find it very difficult to get back into a pattern. But again, this is about investing in finding out what's going to work for me, because again, like menopause, no two women are going to have the same answer. Is not going to work for any two women. So luckily, I could sleep, Rachel, under a stone. I'm one of these women. I could sleep anywhere. I have three sisters, and one of my sisters is not a good sleeper. She's her bed. She's a special bed, special pillow, and everything. But she laughs at me because I often, if we go somewhere, I said, look, I'll sleep. If I have to sleep on the floor, it doesn't bother me when it comes to sleep. But I feel sleep from listening to so many other women that if you get your sleep sorted, a lot of other issues around perimenopause will be lessened. The other symptoms will be lessened.
Now, I know we've touched on a lot of things, but as we wrap up, I'd love to know, what do you most want women to know?
I feel menopause is a story that has not benefited us as we reach our midlife years to date. It has not benefited us. But there's another story within the literature. And that's the work of Professor Sharon McQuaid. She talks about it, about menopause being this quintessential biopsychosocial experience. It is both a crisis and an opportunity. And I am looking at the opportunities. There are huge opportunities within the menopausal story, and these have been overshadowed. So I want women to know that in 2021, there's a new story that needs to be brought into the public domain around menopause. And this story is going to benefit women immensely. And that's my final word.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Magnificent Midlife podcast. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe or follow, share it, and I'd love a 5-star review. It really helps other listeners find the podcast. You can find out more information about this episode in the show notes at magnificentmidlife.com. That's also where you can access one-to-one mentoring with me, my membership program, and other resources to help make your midlife magnificent. Make the most of your next chapter. Help me change the world, one magnificent midlife woman at a time.